We are back here on the show to continue on with a new segment that I will bring up here in just a second, talking about Montez Sweat, a revelation, a game changer this past season for the Chicago Bears. Montez Sweat was traded to the Bears just 10 months ago, but both sides, if you look at the Commanders and the Bears, oddly enough, thinking about it now, again, 10 months from the time that he was traded in hindsight, both teams are in very similar and very positive places right now based on the offseason, the draft, and everything like that went down. You would have thought that trading a guy like Montez Sweat would have really sent this Commanders team into a whole spiral, just sending them into a place where it would have looked like a spot where not a lot of teams can dig themselves out of that hole. But again, they are very similar to where they are right now and based on their expectations and how much excitement there is heading into 2024. But Montez Sweat recently spoke about his old team and how everything went down when he spoke in an interview with the Chicago Sun-Times recently. Montez Sweat, before I get into what he said, he was one of the best pieces for this Commanders team on defense, where their offense struggled a lot of the times with the quarterbacks, the lack of talent on their roster. Montez Sweat, a former 26th overall pick in 2019, he broke out in just his second year with 9 sacks, had another great year just after that in 2022 with 28 quarterback hits and 14 tackles for loss. But like I said, having great seasons, great production from a first round pick, but Washington was 28, 45, and 1 during that time that Montez Sweat was there. So you weren't really moving anywhere with Montez Sweat being a high value player, but overall as a team, you were still struggling. So they decided to trade him with how everything played out in that final year with Ron Rivera and getting a new owner after Dan Snyder and everything that happened with him, bringing in Josh Harris and all these guys, new guys just from the organization down to the players. In that sort of those actions, you traded Montez Sweat as well, and now he ends up with the Bears and has a great second half to the year. Last year, in 9 games, he produced 25 tackles, 6 sacks, just 6 sacks with the Bears, 6.5 with Washington, bringing him to a total of 12.5 last year, and 4 tackles for a loss. Within those 9 games, the Chicago Bears defense was considered one of the best defenses in the NFL at that time based on the stats, the production that they had out there. Montez Sweat really made a big difference for this team, and now reflecting on his time and just how crazy these last 10 months were, Montez Sweat started off one of his statements by saying, "I definitely made a transition to a better spot for me. Shoot, this was my first Pro Bowl and first double-digit sack year, and all those type of things. I notched some accolades that I also had aspirations of getting, but never reached in Washington. You could definitely say it worked out better for me here," and it's hard to argue with him based on all the stats that I just provided on Montez Sweat this past year. But he didn't stop there. He didn't stop there because he went a little bit further, talking about the Commanders and what really went down with them while he was on their team. He said, it was a toxic heavy toll just losing and people around you being kind of okay with losing. It could sometimes rub off on you. You've got to stay hungry and know that you want to win. That's what Montez Sweat said on really what was going on there with the Washington Commanders. And while it does paint the Washington Commanders in a bad light, some people might say that's fair because, really looking at that team during 2019 to just last year or 2022, they were in a very bad spot where I've mentioned before that it's one thing to be bad, but they were so bad to a point where it was almost irrelevant, or just whatever they did, whatever sort of changes they made in the offseason, it was irrelevant because you always knew that they were just going to be a bottom tier, just not very exciting team to follow. And that's the worst you could get to in the NFL, right? Just having no hope, no excitement heading into the next year because you're stuck in a place where you can't really help yourself too much. And that's where the Commanders were for a while. over the last few years. But now, like I said, they brought in a whole boatload of new administrators, some new players. Dan Snyder goes out. Now Josh Harris comes in as the new owner. You bring in Dan Quinn as the new head coach. Same thing for a new general manager in Adam Peters. You bring in so many new players just this offseason to really make you just excited, plain and simple. You haven't had that with the Commanders in a while, and now, based on what Montez Sweat is saying, how much better everything is in Chicago, really looking at this team, and both of them actually now bringing in the Commanders and the Bears into this situation, I think they're very similar. They're very similar, and I mentioned that at the start of this segment, that they're not too far off, because you look at, other than the fact that they both drafted generational type of quarterbacks, both of them have very good outlooks that they are going to be very successful in the NFL, just based on the preseason and their college careers and everything like that. Probably the two best quarterbacks in this rookie class. So having both of them is one of their similarities, but other than that, you saw the huge change in both of their rosters, with the Bears bringing in DJ Moore, Keenan, DeAndre Swift, just guys on both sides of the football that are game changers right away and that are meant to be there to help their rookie quarterbacks. And similarly to the Commanders, they bring in guys like Cameron Curl, not Cameron Curl, Jeremy Chin, I wanted to say. Then also Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler, Nick Allegretti on the offensive line, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr. All those guys are going to be a tremendous help for this Commanders team, similarly to the Chicago Bears bringing in all the players that they did. So now it makes me think that how Montez Sweat was talking, how it's so much better in Chicago. They're right there, I think, in terms of an outlook for 2024. And if I were to ask the question, who is looking more likely to make it further this year based on what we know about each of these teams right now and how they're projected to finish this year, I talked about both of these teams already in my final standing predictions for each division. And I feel like, just directly answering this question, I feel like the Commanders could arguably finish with a better situation towards the playoffs than the Chicago Bears, just because I think it has a lot to do with each of their divisions, right? You look at the NFC North, and I predicted that the Bears would finish third just a few days ago when I started these predictions. I thought the Bears would finish third, and I had the Commanders finishing second, in large part because of their divisions, right? You look at the NFC North, it's hard for the Bears, at least for me, to get convinced that they're going to be better than either the Lions or the Green Bay Packers in their division right off of the bat, starting this new project. So that's one thing. And then with the Commanders, just their situation in the NFC East is a little bit better, because the Giants, I don't think anyone's got aspirations for them to finish first or second. Then you look at the Cowboys and how shaky they're looking now heading into the regular season. Then also you have the Eagles, who I have penciled in as first. And then it leaves the Commanders, where if they play their chips right, and I don't think they have such a uphill battle compared to that of the Chicago Bears, because they only really have to worry about the Cowboys for finishing second, where the Bears are battling with the Packers and the Lions, two of the best teams, arguably, that people have projected to be in 2024. So that's a major part of this, and how those games go within the division. Those are monumental games that I think, with such a young team in the Bears, I think it could cost them a lot of the time, and it could lead to the fact that the Commanders could finish higher than them this year in 2024. But on the flip side, if you look at them, position for position, you could arguably say that the Bears have a better team than the Commanders do, but that's not the question. The question is who's going to make it further, and I just feel like the Commanders have more going in their benefit to their strengths, based heavily on their roster and heavily on who they're playing in their schedule this year. That has a lot to do with it. Finishing second or third in your division is going to make a huge difference when you're trying to make it into the playoffs, and both of them have their quarterbacks for the future. Both of them have exciting pieces on each side, but overall, it's who you're playing, how your schedule shapes out, and the Bears have a little bit tougher challenge to me to get over, and I just don't see it happening in their first year. So the Commanders, to me, could finish better than the Chicago Bears, and it's not an indictment against the Bears. It's just the divisions and how it all shakes out. But I could be wrong. The Bears, I'm high on them, but dealing with the Lions and the Packers just as they're hitting their stride is a huge ask. So feel free for you guys to leave your comments in the comment section using the super chat button. Let me know how you feel on this topic. Do you feel like the Commanders have no shot of finishing better than the Bears, or do you agree with me? At least see my point a little bit in this discussion. But anyway, we have one more topic to get to on talking about the division and how hard some of these are. We're going to wrap up the NFC, talking about the NFC West and giving you guys my predictions on how I see that division shaking out in 2024. So we'll be right back with predicting the final standings for the NFC West.